Okay, welcome to this part 3 video on Indian Contract Act. A very quick recap of what we have done in the previous lectures. In part 1 video, so basically what I have covered, I have discussed about the word contract, what it contains and all the sub-elements, agreement, promise, consideration, offer and all those things. In detail it was discussed in the first part. In the second part what we have discussed all the essentials of a valid contract. In detail we have covered in part 2. So from this video onwards we'll continue further. After the essentials of valid contracts we have types of contract. Now there are a lot of types, so these are the main classifications, these are the broad categories. Again under this categories we have subdivisions. See, based on validity, so we have this grouping here. See, there are a lot of contracts which will be valid, or sometimes there can be contracts which are illegal, sometimes the contracts may not be enforceable for whatever reasons. All those things we will discuss under this category. The second main category is based on formation. See, sometimes the contracts are expressed by way of words, or it can be in written format like this. But sometimes without even expressing something, the contract is formed. Say for example, you go to a coffee restaurant and the coffee comes, you have your cup of coffee and then you are bound to pay for it. And also, you can consider a lot of other examples like this where contracts are formed by actions by implications. So all those things will be discussed under this main category. Third one is based on performance. In a contract, say for example, one party can perform his promise now, the other party can perform it later. So based on the performance also we can divide it. So all these things in detail we will discuss it now. So let's start with this validity. So based on validity or enforceability, how we can divide the contracts. The first one is valid contract. Yeah, valid contract, it is very simple to analyze and understand. So whatever we have discussed so far, all the essentials of valid contract, if a particular contract contains all the valid essentials that we have discussed, so then we call it as valid contract. If any one is missing, so then we cannot call it as valid contract. Very simple. So this is already discussed. So the same thing is mentioned here. It contains all the essentials of a valid contract. So then only we can call it as a valid contract. So nothing much here, since it is already a discussed one. So we are moving to the next one. Next one is void contract. Void contract means a contract which cannot be enforceable. Cannot be enforceable due to a lot of reasons. See, let's consider one simple example. So where I have given a contract to some person, just to develop a business law content book. And later on, after some weeks, something happens to that person. Let's say he met with an accident. So therefore, he could not perform his promise. So then what happens to the contract? So when it is entered, it is a valid contract. Later on, something happened to him based on a situation that he cannot perform, or he cannot fulfill his promise. So that is why it cannot be enforceable. A particular contract which was valid, which cannot be enforceable due to unforeseen situation which is beyond the control of the parties. So those kind of contracts we call it as void contracts. So the same thing is mentioned in the explanation. Let's see the notes, what it says. Yeah, void contracts, it is mentioned in section 2J. So what it says, a contract which ceases to be enforceable. Ceases to be enforceable means that which cannot be enforceable. So as I've written here, ceases to be enforceable means which cannot be enforceable. So therefore, the contract which cannot be enforceable, it just becomes a void contract. So let's consider this example 18 so that your understanding about the topic will be better. I think the same example just now I told, it is here. X agrees to write a book here. X is a party. He agrees to author a particular book with a particular publisher. Now, okay, let's say X is one party, publisher is the other party, first party, second party. Such contract is valid. So remember, void contracts, at the time of entering it will be valid. So later on something happens to the contract, it becomes unenforceable. So these kind of contracts we call it as void contracts, that we have already discussed in the theory part. Okay, let's continue with this example. Later on X dies in an accident. See, if you look at this part, X dying in an accident, it is making the situation in such a way that the contract cannot be enforceable. So these kind of contracts we will call it as void contracts. Okay, let me adjust the screen appropriately. Okay, now I hope it is visible now properly. Okay. Yeah, so this is the example for void contract. Example 19, let's consider one more common example for void contract. A contracts with B, okay, for supply of 10 tons of sugar. See, this is a valid contract. There is a contract between A and B. A agrees with B to supply 10 tons of sugar. So that means it is a valid contract when it is entered into. Later on what happens? But before the supply is effected, the fire caught in the factory. So because of this situation, because of this incident, the contract cannot be enforceable. That means it ceases to be enforceable by law. So those kind of contracts we call it as void contracts. Okay, let's move on to the next classification, that is voidable contract. Voidable contract, what it is? It is mentioned under section 2I. So how section 2I defines? Let's see it. First point, what it says, an agreement which is enforceable by law at the option of one or more parties thereto, but not at the option of other or others, is a voidable contract. See, generally what happens in a voidable contract, always there will be an aggrieved party. See, for example, I am selling this pen to you. Let's consider one simple example before we see what is there in the content. I am selling this Apple pencil. I am forcing the first bench students, using my position as a teacher. I'm threatening you or I'm dominating you to purchase this pencil. So now you do not have an option by force, even though not by choice, by force or for some reasons, you accept to purchase this pencil from me. So now if you look at the situation here, I am in a dominant position. I'm using my position and say I'm threatening you. So because of that force, you are purchasing this pencil. So which means there is no free consent to it. The same thing we have discussed during the free consent also. So that means the party, on whom the force is exercised, that party becomes the aggrieved party. So that aggrieved party has a right to exercise the option of cancelling the contract. So that only it is mentioned here. No, it is enforceable by law at the option of one or more parties. One or more parties means at the option of people who are aggrieved. Basically, these are aggrieved persons. Second point, the same thing is mentioned here. Let's see. Such a right means a right for an aggrieved party may arise from the fact that the contract may have been brought about by one of the parties by CUFM. That means maybe one party has used any of these modes to obtain the assent of the other person. Coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistake. All these things will be discussed in detail in the upcoming chapters. So for now, what we will understand, voidable contract means one person is forcing or threatening other person to enter into the agreement. So such person, we call it as aggrieved person, aggrieved party, and that aggrieved party has a right to cancel the contract. So that only it is mentioned here, that we call as voidable contract. So let's consider an example so that your understanding will be clear. Example 20 I will analyze. So first we will read what it is written, then I will analyze it. X promises to sell his scooter to Y for 1 lakh. Okay, let him sell. So here it is a valid contract. There appears to be no problem here. Let's see what happened later. However, the consent of X has been procured by Y at gunpoint. So that means here X is an aggrieved party because X has been forced to enter into an agreement, not by choice, not by free will. So therefore X becomes the aggrieved party. So here this particular contract is voidable at the option of X, because X is an aggrieved party here. So Y literally pointed gun at X's forehead, just like a movie style, and he got his permission. So X will be treated as aggrieved party. So now the contract is voidable at the option of X. So that is what your example 20 says. So that means if X accepts the contract, contracts becomes valid. If F prefers to refuse the contract, then it becomes a voidable contract at whose option? At the option of X. So that is about voidable contract. So what is that key word that you remember for voidable contract? The key word is it is exercisable at the option of one or more parties. And who are those one or more parties? Those are aggrieved parties. Simple. Yeah, and also a table is given which makes a difference between void contract and voidable contract. So whatever we have discussed so far under void contract and voidable contract, the same thing it is given in the tabular form in a BCom style format. For your convenience it is given here. You can later read it. Now we'll move on to illegal contracts. So the name itself says it is illegal. Illegal means something which is prohibited. Okay, anything that is prohibited by law, so that we call it as illegal contracts. So the first point, the same thing is mentioned here. The law forbids to be made. A contract which the law forbids to be made. That means the law is prohibiting certain things. So those kind of contracts we call it as illegal contracts. And also the court will not enforce this kind of contracts. So that means the parties to the contract will not have any kind of legal rights if it is an illegal contract. Yeah, the third point, what it says, an illegal agreements, all illegal agreements are void, but all void agreements are not necessarily illegal. So let's prove this point, what it says. Let me copy this one. Oh, I'm not able to copy this. Okay. Yeah, it's possible. Copy. Let me write it here. See, this point is already discussed. Once again, I will explain it here. All illegal contracts are void. That means illegal contracts, anyways, the law is for prohibiting them. Side by side, it cannot be enforceable. So that which is not enforceable, automatically it will come and fall under void contracts. So that way, all illegal agreements are void. But all void agreements are not illegal agreements. So remember, when we are discussing this void agreements, I told these are initially valid. Initially void agreements are, these are valid contracts or valid agreements. But later on something happens to the situation and it becomes unenforceable. So So that is the difference between illegal agreements and void agreements. So illegal contracts, from the beginning stage onwards, it is void. Initially it is prohibited. That is the difference. From the very beginning stage onwards, these are unenforceable contracts. But when it comes to void agreements, these are initially valid, but later on it becomes unenforceable. So that is the key fundamental difference between these two. Okay, the same thing is mentioned in the above classification, above differentiation also. You can read it and you will understand it better. Okay, example 21, what it says, let's see about illegal contracts. A contract that is immoral. Oh, sorry, let me adjust the screen. Yeah, example 21, let's analyze this one. Contracts. So all kind of contracts, those are immoral or which are against the public policy, are illegal in nature. So any kind of agreement between two parties that is immoral or it is against the public policy, those contracts automatically we call them as illegal contracts. More discussion on this public policy, we will see it under unit number 6, because unit number 3 or 6 we have a separate topic for that one. So what are those contracts which are against public policy in detail? Once again we'll discuss it in appropriate unit numbers. Yeah, here also there is a distinction between void agreement and illegal agreement. The analysis just now I have made here, you can see the same thing which is written here also. So this is given for your convenience, you can read it. Yeah, fifth one, so the last classification under validity. Based on validity, the contracts are divided in a certain way. We are discussing that one. So the last one is unenforceable contract. So unenforceable contract, it is something different than void contracts. I don't categorize this under void contracts. So how it is different, we will see it. Where a contract is good in substance, but because of some technical defect. If you look at the keyword here, technical defect. Because of some technical defect, the contract cannot be enforced. So these kind of contracts, we call them as unenforceable contracts. These are also void contracts, but there is a thin line of difference. Because remember, in void contracts, the situation or something happens to the contract which is beyond the control of the other parties. So here what we are telling, it is because of some technical defect, contract becomes unenforceable. Say for example, absence in writing. Maybe in the terms it is mentioned that certain things are essential and those things are missing, so it becomes unenforceable. Or sometimes it can be barred by limitation also. So barred by limitation, any debt, what it says, any debt that is not recovered in 3 years, automatically it is barred by limitation. So that means if you have given any money to any of your friends, if you do not recover it within 3 years, automatically it will be barred by limitation. So it becomes unenforceable contract. In case of unenforceable contracts, what will happen? Both the parties cannot sue on each other. So both parties will not get any legal rights or remedies. So the key word here is technical defect. You will have to remember this, technical defect. Due to technical defect, those contracts are not enforceable. Such kind of contracts, we call them as unenforceable contracts. Yeah, so the first category is over. Now let's discuss the second category. That is based on formation of contract, how these are differentiated. So the first one is express contracts. Express contracts means these are either mentioned in words or sometimes it will be in the written format. Simple, a contract whenever it is happening between two parties, either it has to be through words or it has to be through writing. So if it is there in any of this modes, we call it as express contracts. The same thing is mentioned here. These are expressed either by words or in writing. So if nothing is mentioned, still there is a contract. So those contracts we call them as implied contracts. So that is our next point, we will discuss it. So let's quickly see this example 23, what it says. A tells B on telephone. That means this is nothing but this is happening by words. There is a contract between A and B. How it is happening on telephone? So that is happening by words. So this is an example for express contracts. Second one is implied contract. Implied contracts, these come by acts, by implication. Even though nothing is specifically told, it comes by implications. So how it is, we will see it now. Yeah, these come into existence by implication. So I think this these examples relating to implied contracts we would have already covered in our first part 1 lecture, but still again quickly we will rush through it. Example 24, if you see this coolie example that we have already discussed, okay, where a coolie in uniform picks up the luggage of A. So typically this will happen in railway stations. A coolie coming and picking up your luggage, and you are keeping quiet, definitely he will demand some money and you are bound to pay by it. Why? Because although there is no words between you and that coolie, or it is not mentioned, or it is not in written format, these can be inferred by actions. So these kind of contracts we call them as implied contracts. This coolie example we have already discussed. Coffee example also it is already discussed. A drinks a coffee in restaurant. So which means you enter a coffee restaurant, you are just sitting there, somebody coming and serving the coffee from the hotel, and you drink it. It is reasonably expected that you are bound to pay for it. Yeah, this is already a discussed one. So these kind of contracts we call them as implied contracts. Tacit contracts. The word tacit means, as I already told, it just means silent. So some contracts happen silently without spoken words or without a writing medium. So those kind of contracts we call it as silent contracts or tacit contracts. This is again inferred through the conduct of the parties. So this is same as implied contracts. Implication. These contracts just happen by implication. ATM example and fall of hammer in an auction sale. As we have already discussed in first class, ATM is an example for implied contracts. Quasi contract. Quasi contract means this is actually this is strictly not a contract between the parties, but still the law imposes certain rights on some parties. So these kind of contracts we call it as quasi contracts. So these are created by law. These are not actually created by the parties. These are actually created by law. Okay, let me adjust the screen 1 second. Okay, now I think it is clear. Okay, visible. Yeah, quasi contracts, it is often created by law. So let's see an example. Example 26, what it says, obligation of finder of lost goods. Obligation of finder of lost goods. So this is created by law. Okay, say for example, you have found a valuable item, or sometimes you would have lost a valuable item, somebody else would have found it. So here, by implication of law, that finder of lost goods, he has the responsibility to preserve the goods. Why? Because even though there is no contract between the parties, strictly there is no contract between the parties, but still it is created by law. So these contracts are called quasi contracts. So similarly, any money is paid under mistake. So you have the right to recover it. If any money is paid under mistake, or if any excessive money is paid, you have all the right to recover back your excess money paid. Why? Because these are exclusively created by law. So quasi contracts, these are, just remember this keyword, these are created by, this is created by law. E-contracts means it is very simple. Anything that is used, any contract that is made with the help of technology, that is using electronic means. Example, Amazon or Myntra orders. You're placing an order by using a technology. So anything where you're using a technology, that simply becomes a e-contract. So nothing new about it. Now we have the last category, that is on the basis of performance of contract. On the basis of performance, there are some categories of contracts. What are those? We will see it. See the word executed. Executed contract means it is already done. The promises are already fulfilled. Say for example, there is a contract between you and me. So I am selling this Apple pencil and you are paying me some money. So if I already sold this pen, then it becomes an executed contract. This is scenario number 1. Consider the same example, scenario number 2. So this pencil will be delivered after 1 week. So you will also make the payment after 1 week. So that means both the promises are to be fulfilled in future. So that becomes an executory. Executory means it is to be done in future. This is a simple English. To be done in future. Executed means it is already completed. Executory means the promises are yet to be fulfilled. So let's see some examples so that your understanding will be clear. So here let's consider example 18. Here what it says, where G agrees to take the tuition of H. So that means here G is a teacher, H is the student. Okay, a pre-engineering student. He's taking the tuition from the next month. Okay, and H in consideration promises to pay G 1,000 per month. So this contract we call it as executory contract because G is a teacher and H is a student. So here he will teach. The commitment of H to G is to pay. So if you see both this promises, these are happening in future. Both these promises are happening in future. We call it as executory. Very simple. Here there is one more subdivision, unilateral and bilateral. See the word unilateral. Okay, let me remove this red mark here. Okay, the mark is gone. Unilateral is very simple. The word unilateral means it is one-sided. Okay, if one side promise is over and the other side is pending, we call it as unilateral. Just give me a second. Let me adjust the screen. Unnecessary, there is a blank space. Okay, now it is rectified. Okay, great. One-sided contract. If one side is pending or if one side is over, that we call it as unilateral contract. Unilateral contract. Bilateral means it is two-sided. Two-side, it is promises are still pending. Two sides, if the promises are pending, we call it as bilateral executory contract. that is bilateral. So very simple. So let me take back through the main diagram. So when we started the discussion, the types of contracts, so basically there are three kinds of main categories. One is contracts can be divided based on validity or enforceability. The second category is based on formation. There are so many contracts. And the third main category is performance. So based on performance, these are the contracts, and all these things in detail we have discussed. Just now we have completed. So in the future episodes, that is part 4, I guess. So from the next class onwards, we'll be discussing about the all the rules and essentials of offer. So basically, what is an offer? We already know it, but all the details, all the valid rules and the essentials, we'll be seeing it in the next class. See you until the next video. Take care. Bye bye. Happy reading. And if you have any doubts, feel free to message me. Thank you. See you all until the next video.